Alrighty boys, so I've recorded this after I've done the react. We got to an hour and a half with this one. I was skeptical to react to this video because it's so long. I knew I would add a lot of time to it, and I've added an hour, so I've tripled it. A lot of you guys said it in the personal Discord, make sure you get in there if you're not. But mentioned that I shouldn't apologize for the length of these videos because they rather than the short form content. I want to be somewhere in the middle, right? Like not too long. This I would describe as too long. But it's masterminds, it's sophisticated, it's such a good video by Avenger, yeah, so that's why it's long. But I don't want to keep trending with this length for sure. I'd like to keep it capped at an hour if I could. Either way, that's for the future. Video's good, yeah. I'm a bit sour in the beginning because of racing ships getting used in PvP and snub fighters being toxic as all hell, so don't just judge the video too harshly on my toxic feedback in that regard. But I think the video really starts to cook and gets really good around the 30% mark, yeah? So just keep in mind, I very much pivot to positivity at that point. Great video, awesome. You guys help me out with the algo, help me finesse this thing. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on the other end. Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we have Master Modes Needs to Change, and here is why, from the big man himself, AvengerOne. So I do watch his stream in the mornings, and me and him share some DMs usually about the opinions on Master Modes. I know he was rather jaded in the beginning and didn't have as much faith with the brutal tunings earlier. And in 3.23 right now, they are going through rapid changes. Like every day the meta shifts, what's competitive, weapons that get abused one day are irrelevant the next day. So it's a very unstable experience to judge right now. But the things that aren't changing is the flight. They're just going through weapons right now at a rapid rate. They are changing them. Even the way they function, like the charge up mechanics on the on some of the railguns and the singes and stuff, for example. So they're in the fast iteration phase of weapons, but flight needs to change. I'm sure he's going to mention that. One thing I'll mention too that I've kind of come to a realization with is a lot of Avengers feedback is in the squadron department, like in the group gameplay and position, like or the characteristics of flight within a group setting. A lot of my feedback, because the group setting for me, that stuff is fine. Like if groups are capable of fighting each other and people aren't just escaping all the time and there's a reasonable rate of death, like TTK, time to kill, isn't extremely high like it is in live, then I'm happy. And I'm just dependent on the working mechanics around that. But when it comes to the 1v1 stuff, that face-to-face you versus a target experience is a lot where my feedback comes into play, and I think mine is more focused. So I think more about the geometry in relation to the target and, you know, what they're trying to achieve and what I'm trying to achieve and stuff like that. And I think that's a lot of our feedback in Shadow Moses too, because that's where the game gets really deep. But I think, and you know, this video will correct me if I'm wrong, I think Avengers feedback is really heavily in that kind of where does he fit in the group fights, or where does the certain ships or archetypes fit in the group setting. So I think we kind of give different feedback for different situations, I guess. So you can't really compare ours, but let's just see how it goes. Make sure you give me a thumbs up and a comment to help me finesse this algo. I appreciate you guys for doing it. I see you doing it. Roll call, all right? And let's get into it.
Welcome back, everybody, to another video. Today, I'd like to briefly give some feedback on master modes in EPTU 3.23. This video is aimed specifically at the CIG staff that are currently working on the flight systems and working on the current balance tuning. I think this is a good video to me to express some of the things that Master Modes does really well and that I'm very happy for, and then also give some constructive criticism as to where the flight model may want to go in the future, and give some in-game testimony videos and also graphics to help illustrate some points I want to bring up as to ways that we can improve the flight model for all Star Citizen players, not just people who play PvP.
Yeah, not a bad point. If you want to give feedback, it's important to look at the casual aspect of it too. I forgot to mention too, I actually got told to do this react from a friend of mine who had a real hardcore pass in Star Citizen. And he's from a really prominent Elite Dangerous org, and he mentioned how good this video was. And he's a harsh critic, so I'm looking forward to busting this open.
I want to state for the record, because there seems to be some commotion on the internet, who would have thought, that I am against master modes and I've always hated it and that my videos are basically trying to tear down the system. All I can say is that's not true, and that I have been and always have been for master modes since CIG has kind of talked about it and Yogi has been working on it. I have always been and still am against the flight tuning, which is different than the flight model. Okay? Live, albeit...
Yeah, so like the details of flight in comparison to like the framework. Yep.
A more enjoyable experience at the current time because there's so much of a breadth of movement. The problem became that live would not and could not fix fundamental issues with the flight model because the geometry of how the ships functioned simply could not force a closing distance because top speeds were the way they were. In master modes, this issue is...
In previous flight models, they used to have stuff that would fix that problem. My favorite was in 3.4 when you started to go above the SCM speed, which was like the general combat speeds, around the 300 mark. You had to go in a straight line. And if you ever deviated from that line, you would rapidly black out, lose control of your ship. And then it would just slow right down as you blacked out. 3.4 had great combat, man. Like the 1v1s were very dorky. But like the group gameplay was sensational. So there were ways to fix this in the live flight model, but I just don't think they wanted to repeat issues of the past. So I understand why they did master modes. I don't think it was the only solution, but it's not a bad one. Like the framework's good. The mechanics make sense. I'm still yet to test it in the PU. I streamed last night on Twitch for anyone who caught it, and man, just what a jank experience. The lag was so bad. Just 5-minute pauses and stuff. I'm desperate to get some gameplay footage out there, but hard to do when the PU is in such a bad shape as it is. And the squadron battle is only as good depending on time zone. Like going to the beach when the waves are good, right? So it's like you either have to play in that time period or you don't play it much. So I think I really wanted to get better, and I really hope that the way they've done this framework does fit into the bigger picture that is the PE, like logistics, piracy, bounty hunting, all that stuff, because that's what I worry about, right? Is I've done so much squad battle and like dueling in master modes with the combat, and the combat can work and it needs to improve dramatically, sure, but I'm yet to see how it fits into the bigger ecosystem, right? Like, how do the whales get away from the sharks? How do the sharks get away from the killer whales? And stuff like that.
Fixed with asymmetrical speed zones, which we can go into later. And the point is, I was and still am for the game to become a more inclusive single vector movement system, which allows controller parity, and an asymmetrical speed zone, which master modes offers, which fixes the core problem with the live model.
Single vector. So is he talking about getting rid of the 2-speed system, which is like the boosted and unboosted?
However, I have always been against the way that they have tuned the system. How fast the ships go, what the feeling of the ships are, what the intention behind weapons is. This has a dramatic impact on the feel, the playability, and enjoyability of the experience. But that doesn't mean that the model is not sound and actually implemented correctly. I will say that many people online have demonized me because I have very fiery opinions about master modes. And that if I send out videos like my Archimedes video recently, that I'm showing having fun playing it, this makes me a hypocrite. I don't know how to respond to that kind of ignorance other than it's just simply not true. I'm allowed to have fun playing a video game, so same with you. And what I have found in master modes is that playing snub fighters like the Archimedes and the M50...
Oh, burn him at the stake. Burn him at the stake. He knows I feel this way about this, right? And I'm going to go on a tangent here. I mentioned this in my last video. When people go up against snub fighters and racing ships, it's cancer, bro. Like, Yogi, you gotta get your act together in this department, or that team. You guys have to get your act together. The meta can't be to just go for the smallest ship that takes advantage of the bad network optimizations, bad server performance, hit registration, the bad gunnery, you know, or bad tracking of broken shields. That's what these tiny microscopic fighters always do. And I know that Avenger enjoys playing these, but fuck it. Like, if I was Chris, I would delete the snubs and I would strip the racing ships of weapons. You cannot have a M50 racer as the most competitive PvP fighter. It's ridiculous, guys. Like, this has to get solved. It's so broken. The fighters need to do the fighting, not the racers be the best fighters. Like, or this snub craft, you know, be the best fighters. It's so bad. And like, I know Avenger enjoys the snubs, and I'm guessing it's because they're hard to hit. But the problem is, Avenger is when anyone else is trying to fight these people in snubs, and it's not just you, it's anyone trying to shoot any decent, half decent player in snub fighters or racing ships. It's the most broken jank. It's literally a soup of the worst aspects of playing this game. Like, it's just, the experience is so broken every time. Like, this isn't about like these fighters are so great at doing this. It's about they're broken, dude. Like, and the worst part is they're broken per the person playing it. Like, some people hop into these ships, they weaponize the worst characteristics of the flight tuning. They have really bad performing computers. Maybe they've got packet loss. Maybe the server's performing bad, or they just know how to ruin the performance. But they weaponize the jank every time. And I think that's why, like, I was opposed to everyone like shitting on the F8. I like the F8. Why do I like the F8? Because it's a huge ship. I never have to worry about hit registration or like gimmicky wiggling and stuff like this, because it's so huge, right? Does it have a high top speed? Is it overpowered with weaponry? Sure, that can be tuned, fixed easily. But the game looks like it's working when you're versing that, right? The game looks like it's broken when you're versing these tiny microscopic fighters. I honestly, bro, I hope they get stripped. Like, I hope every racing ship has its weapons removed so that they are ships for racing, not combat. It's so bad. I can't stand that. And I wish that snubs are so hamstrung that they're only used to go into, like, you know, maybe shipwreckages of like capital ships, or like in caves and stuff. But I can't stand when they're used in combat. It's so bad, man. Like, it's just, what were they thinking? The Fury's even worse. It's so hard to hit. It's so annoying. And ships like this need to pester you. You know, they need to be pests that can almost be ignored, you know, for a certain time period. But to have them competitive in PvP, and like, it's just the worst, man. It's so bad. I can't stand it. I'm really passionate against it. And I just don't like when people weaponize the broken aspects of the game. And that's what happens. But the problem is, and this isn't Avengers' fault, the best flight characteristics are put into the most broken performing ships in the game. Like, why don't the fighters have the maneuvering and flight capabilities of these light fighters? And I get it, like, you want the light class to move around like it's light, you know, and have all this speed and maneuvering, but you shift the community into these ships, you shift the community into a broken experience. So it's a lack of flight characteristics in the fighters, whether it's small, medium, large. Those flight characteristics in tuning, maneuvering needs to increase to get people out of those broken ships, because it can't be that, man. It just can't. Otherwise, it's going to be a very bumpy, broken road, and the PvP experience is going to be one of where we just complain about the performance of the game. But if you move the meta and you shift it towards the fighters, the brawlers, you know, then the game works, and it just has to become interesting, the mechanics within that. So I hate to see it, boys. I hate to see racing ships at the top. It's not good, Yogi. You gotta get it together in that aspect. You do.
These fighters are one of the only ships in the current build of Master Modes that allows for breadth of movement, flight characteristics to shine through, and the actual skill of a pilot to be able to take on a multiple gang situation, which in the PU is very important.
Yeah, but the problem is, like, it's not that these snub fighters are great at out-positioning a target. Like, you're not fighting a snub fighter and be like, damn, he's like getting my pancake a lot and getting up under my nose a lot and like wrestling me in, you know, space geometry and positional combat. It's just that they're tiny, they're fast, and they're annoying to track. That's it. Like, but the worst part is too is he's right. Like they're like a mixture between the light fighter and the interceptor. So they have the top high speed, like really high speeds, and then they have it in every direction. Whereas the interceptor class is a higher top speed, but it has very little maneuvering up, left, right, you know, and then turn rate. This snub has it all. But the worst part is, like, the answer is it has less. What would the word be? It's uncuffed, you know, like it's just got total freedom in all 6 off, and that's why it's so strong. Like, and it's just like it's got the least punishment or penalty to its flight characteristics because it's a snub. That's why it feels good. The breath of fresh air, you know, the all the flight characteristics of it is because it's just got everything, you know, and that's the problem. It shouldn't have that, especially given how small and already hard it is to hit. So they need to make those ships get one shot, you know, like if they get caught for a second, it should be almost over. The racing ships just need to not have weapons. They do. It's unbearable. That frustrates me a lot.
So, just because I have found a small part of the game that
But it's like they don't have the tuning. It's like everything. They're like, all right, let's make sure the interceptors can't do this. Let's make sure the light fighters can't do this. Let's make sure the heavy fighter class can't do this. And then they just left the snubs. They could have everything. Like, they never got anything taken away from them.
really enjoy, that gives me hope for Master Modes, does not make me a hypocrite. And although there are people out there who would like to paint me as the bad guy, all I can say is, what do you think? I'd also like...
It's like, you know what it's like? It's like going in a squadron battle and you're playing with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You know, like everyone's in fighters and stuff, and then there's some people in snubs and racing ships that are just tiny versions that are just hyper speed, like infuriating. And Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Okay, that's what it is.
I'd like to remind people about the CIG staff that are working on the flight model, and Yogi in particular. I have spoken to Yogi at length. I think he's the best person that you could have possibly asked for this job. And I think the criticism that Yogi has been getting and members of the team about the flight model on Spectrum and other places have been mostly good, but there's been a lot of folks who've been going a little too far beyond the line. And I'd like to make sure that we understand that we are very fortunate to have somebody who is knowledgeable and willing to take people's feedback. I don't think there's any company out there.
And here's the thing, and I'm good friends with Yogi, like it's pretty well documented. People call me a sellout because I got a good relationship with the CIG developers, specifically in the flight team. And Yogi, like, he does a huge, goes above and beyond community outreach for sure. But the thing is, there is lessons that are getting learnt in master modes that have been issues for years and years and years, which should have been solved with the release of master modes. You know, like the fact that we still can't fix the backstrafe problem, like the people that kite away from the pip or away from the center of the fight, whether it's you're strafing up and away, left and away, down and away, or just back. You know, the fact that that problem still has not got fixed, it is ridiculous. And I do think that those guys need to come up with a solution that is going to fix that, and they need to do it sooner than later, because otherwise all they've done is created the same problems within a smaller bubble. And I do expect more from those guys in that aspect. The thing is, the game needs to have a low entry so that a lot of people can get into PvP. like, and combat in general. Flying a ship cannot be a daunting task anymore, and Master Modes has solved that to a huge degree. But they're also extremely hard-headed on some things like Trichording, the 45s and stuff, and it's hurt the game now that they've introduced Master Modes. Like, the game looks way worse competitively, forcing everyone into pitch because it creates TikTok gameplay on your screen, right? That was a huge consequence to them removing the 45s and replacing that with the pitch meta, right? And then Trichording has killed the ability to force positional combat in an opponent. And the complaint from them is that it's not intuitive to trichord. But when you're face to face with the target, and I want you guys to imagine a Gladius in front of you, if you want to get positional combat, it means you are trying to get around the target. Yeah, so you are face to face with the Gladius, you're looking at each other. If you want to get an angle, which is what positional combat is, and that is intuitive, you're going to combine your strafes to get it. You're not going to go straight to him, because if you go straight to him, your pip is directly on your ship, and you're going to take 1,000 rounds to the face and die. So you want to try and get around him. So you're going to combine going forward to close the distance, going maybe right to get an angle, and then up to get above him, because you're not going to go, when two pancakes fight each other or two floppy disks are facing each other, you want to get the top view of the floppy disk, right? Like, so I would argue it is intuitive to use trichording. What Yogi's argument is, it's not intuitive to use trichording to get from A to B. And SCM isn't about A to B. It's about combat. It's about geometry, right? So it's like, why we've lost trichording when it comes to the space combat, which is the ability to force angle position on someone, I find to be a really poor argument. Like, and they need to code their way out of this. Like, whatever system they have made for the flight tuning, it needs to change at a system level to allow for positional combat to get achieved. And I do not think that there's going to be a way to do this, which isn't going to be gimped without using trichording. That's the sad reality of it. So I think, I don't like how hard-headed they are in that aspect. And the same with the 45s and stuff like this. Like, they are missing they're missing the best things about live, and it's like, just because I'm saying trichording is good does not mean I want everybody to be trichording all the time, right? And it doesn't mean I want trichording to be twice or 50% faster than everything else. But whether it's a 10 or 20% advantage, I just want positional combat to be achievable intuitively and work, right? Like, that's what I want about it. If you guys have arguments, it shouldn't be, the best for racing, or you shouldn't fly faster than going in a corner than it is going forward, then fine. Create a mechanic where if you're flying forward, it ramps up very slow, but it ramps up higher than the trichord limit, right? Like, there's ways to program around the worst aspects of the trichording stuff without just removing it. Yeah. And they need to get creative with the solution, because this algorithm that is the flight tuning is not working when it comes to the 1v1 or the positional combat of these two or whatever archetypes interfacing with each other. The math doesn't work yet, guys, and it should. The entire point of was to bring the combat speeds on a group scale to, more reasonable ranges, and to make this type of gameplay possible. But, we need to bring back outskilling opponents. You can't outskill the weaponry right now, because positional advantage isn't possible. Positional advantage isn't possible because there's nothing to arrest the drift and get a position on someone. So, like, I love those guys. They're a cool team. They're cool guys. They go above and beyond to, have conversations with people. They do a really good job. But they've got to start looking at some of this stuff, because the answers are right there. The whole PvP community knows they've got a combined 1,000,000 hours PvPing in it. they know what mechanics they were leaning on to create positional combat and interesting depth towards PvP and stuff like that. And they know what they're talking about, man. Like it does. The positional combat needs to get better, man. It does, because at the moment it's face-to-face DPS races, and maybe you can get a pass by and then turn around and it continues to be a DPS race. So it's got to get better in these aspects. The geometry, the flight tuning needs to get better. It does. Like and I don't want to come across too negative, but like it's time, guys. It's time.
That would put up with the amount of shit that some of the CIG employees have been getting over the last
maybe
few weeks.
I'm the negative one now.
To be honest, I think it's quite amazing that they've been sticking around and still listening to people's opinions. So for what it's worth, I'd like to thank the CIG folks who are working on the flight model, that you've been doing a great job, and that we are far from complete on master modes. That being said, I think master modes tuning was the issue that I brought up in previous videos.
Yeah, the framework's been really good. Like squads, great. Group fights, awesome. A lot of it's good, but the positional combat between ships is extremely bad. Arguably a lot worse in MM. Got to improve there. But it is good. Like, I don't want to come across as if I'm too negative about it, but it is good.
As to what I want people to understand, that what we are losing, and the idea is we are losing a lot of the flight characteristics that felt really great in the live build of Star Citizen. That has not changed. I still feel like Master Modes has suffocated most of the flight capabilities of a lot of ships, and I feel like that's a crying shame, because Star Citizen should feel like a flight-based game if you're playing a space-playing game in space. Whatever the case may be, I want the game to be the best it can be. And the way we do this is we give constructive feedback and criticism in a professional way. Now, I have not always done this. I am a human being like everyone else. On my streams, I regularly am passionate about how I feel about things. But when I have something like a video that I can sit down and think about what things I want to bring up, I want to bring it up in a calm and professional way so we can better illustrate the points I'm trying to bring up and show empirically what is working and what is simply not working. This issue about flight movement, and the game should be in the minds of every single player who plays Star Citizen. This affects all of us. The PvPers, the PvEers,
I guess
industrialists, the role players.
It depends on where he's going with this, right? If he's talking about the advanced stuff, which is like motion in regards to target versus target, like up close geometry, then the thing is, it only impacts difficult PvE encounters in the future, and it only involves like the PvP aspect of the game. But if he's talking about big picture squad presence, group presence, then it does encompass the entire community for sure.
It does not matter. We all play Star Citizen. So a better flight experience for everybody doesn't just make player versus player content better, it makes the game better, which means we all win. So I'd like to say that these are my opinions, and to not get too fired up, please post your thoughts and feedback in the comment section here, and understand that I am only coming from a place of genuine love for the game. I'd like to see it be the best.
Yeah, you can't doubt that.
I just
it's
feel
just
like
passion,
the way
man.
that the current tuning,
everyone's
again,
just passionate,
tuning, not model, for master modes needs some work, and these are my suggestions. But I'd like to briefly start off with what master modes gets right, so we can start off on a positive note. Since we've all started playing master modes, I have noticed a bunch of things about the model that I feel like it does really, really well. One would be asymmetric speed zones, the accessibility of the system, the weapon diversity, which has been a much...
Yeah, weapon diversity just came in 323. It is much better. Cooler to see different weapon types getting experimented with and picked. But I also worry that the weapon diversity is a bit shallow. Like, yeah, there's now different weapons as options, but the weapons don't have enough difference in how they perform. Like, one of the great things in the past was that the cannon gameplay changed the entire way you needed to fly a ship. You need to get up close. You need to think about time on target and then time off target while you regenerated your weapons. Stuff like this. A lot of the cannons just have similar characteristics to the repeaters, for example, and they're just like a slower animation, but relatively the same experience. So I do worry that the weapon diversity isn't diverse enough, and that it should change the game drastically in how you play it. But I am very welcoming of the fact that we now have cannons, shotguns, railguns that have unique performing mechanics. I'm a real big fan of that stuff.
anticipated.
But it's
and
going to
also
improve
very
for sure.
refreshing change. The thrust ramping or the jerk profiles for ships to make the wiggling go away. The single vector movement, which allows for controller parity, and just the overall feel of the experience being a little bit more friendly to new players. I think all of these things Master Modes does, and it does well.
So he's using Rhino and
The asymmetric
longswords,
speed zones
greatswords
allow
there.
us to have, I guess you could say, the not destruction, but the removal of infinite backstrafe kind of playability, and this kind of exploitive system where people would just stay at their highest speed and you just simply could not engage them. The accessibility comes in when the system becomes a little more easy to use, a little more straightforward, which I think, especially for a single player campaign.
Doesn't the UI, I'm just watching the video here, because I know a lot of you guys listen audio only, but man, the UI improvements are so good. I worry that the text on targets is too high. Like, what does this look like when there's 50 players on your screen? Is it just a massive text everywhere? Because the names on against players get really huge, but the UI has gone through massive improvement. Really happy with it.
In game would definitely make the experience better. The weapon diversity has been a massive bump up in playability in terms of the change in weapon speeds, the different types of weapons, the return of cannons has really made playing the Master Modes.
I think the cannons just need to feel a bit more like cannons. And I know Yogi and that are paranoid that they don't want the game to turn into like one-shot city. So I can relate to that. But I definitely think that the cannons need to maybe have slower projectiles and be larger hitting or something like that. But they should change the experience, specifically in the flight aspect.
Experience really fun because there's a lot of swapping.
But it's cool. It's still super cool that a lot of these weapons are good. You know,
it's been a lot of fun.
And
it is nice to move away from the repeater meta, which got very stale after 3 years. And the single vector movement,
3 years,
which has removed the trichording or multiple input system, which, quite frankly, we all had to see coming. Because the truth is, even though flying with joysticks is a lot of fun, the fact is, if one control scheme has too much of an advantage over another, it just makes the whole playability experience a little unfair. I am all for making the game fair, balanced, and competitive with different control schemes within reason. But I think it's no stretch to say that mouse keyboard, HOTAS, HOMAS, all these different types of setups, having a single vector movement system where the computer gives you a relative angle based on your inputs, instead of just accumulating inputs and giving you the most. To put it in layman's terms, less inputs means more controller parity. More inputs, more control fidelity, so more joysticks, that kind of stuff, in the old system would just give you more vectors of control, which would allow you to have more Gs, and it would just make people feel like they were being cheated on. Because if I am playing with a certain control scheme and I just simply am not allowed to have the same amount of control as somebody else, it definitely feels like I'm at a pay-to-win disadvantage. So the single vector movement that we have now in Master Modes definitely brings that kind of parity in here, which
I don't know. I don't think so, really. Like, I don't think that the trichording or anything like that was of any benefit to any control scheme. The only argument, right, that I see in our Discord, which is probably at one of the highest levels when it comes to competitive gameplay, the complaints are really just the ease of motion when it comes to a mouse and the bending of the settings in relation to the difficulty of tracking a target with a joystick, like the physical controller aspect of it. But the combining of strafes and stuff were never described as an advantage when it comes to like digital versus analog controls. So I don't know if I can agree to that. And the thing is too, is like, I was happy for trichord to go away, right? Like, because a lot of my rants end up being trichord based nowadays. But I was happy to see trichord go for sure. And then months and months ago, I started to realize that trichording was the mechanic that was used to force and arrest drift often, to like force a player to react to movement that you're making. Mainly because the game would drift you in a certain direction, and then trichord was the way to like force a position often. Now, the problem is because they've taken those edges off of trichord, there's no real movement. It's just face to face. Like, the act of forcing any sort of positional combat takes way too long to achieve before you're already cooked by the target for trying to do so. So having nerfing the trichord, I think, definitely was a mistake. But like, the problem is people like bunch all the trichording issues into one single argument, and it's like I only appreciated the tricording aspects of flight when it came to up close positional combat. Okay, but the big picture, which is like the, you know, moving around on ice skates with tricord, the getting to max speed to retreat away from your enemies using tricord, I hated those things. Like, if I were to describe myself as being pro tricord, I'm only pro tricord in the aspect of face-to-face positional combat or maneuvering at a slow speed combat scenario. Yeah, so like if it was the solution and it was the comeback, I would want it to be fixed in those other aspects. Like, you go above SCM, it should be outlawed. You know, like you shouldn't be able to use it when you're not out of combat, for example. It shouldn't be used to cut away. Maybe it shouldn't be twice as fast. Like, you're literally combining all the speeds. Maybe the advantage should only be 10 to 20% in comparison to other speeds. Maybe forward strafe, like I described earlier in this react, can overcome tricord if given the time. You know, stuff like this. Maybe tricord can just be a quick acceleration to a limit or something like that. But I do think that being able to push into those angles and, you know, cut geometry and trim the fat away from drift, I do think it needs to come back. But, you know, that's my tricord argument. But I wouldn't say the controllers were hindered because of that. I think, if anything, the controller differences in performance comes down to wiggling versus tracking on the nose. And I know a lot of the Shadow Moses guys protesting a lot of the inertia that's tied to the nose. What do they call it? Overdrift or something. I forgot the terminology, but
in the long run will be much healthier for the game. All of these things I just don't think so. With master modes. The addition to the gunnery system changes, so we have a cone fire, have all gone a long way at
I
making
like the cone fire
stuff
stuff.
Just a better experience in general.
For sure.
And the intention that I know CIG has at making Multicrew ships genuinely viable in combat, which is the destination that I would also like Multicrew ships to have. The experience and the lens that I see the game through is much different than some people. Maybe because of my experience, maybe because of the way I conceive it or the way I look at it, but
I'm definitely guilty of not looking at the multi-crew experience, and I hope that those guys are getting looked after too. Yeah, like a lot of people would like to discredit like elite PvP sweat lords as just wanting light fighter gameplay. No, I want the big picture to all be good. Like, absolutely. Capital ships, multi-crew, the heavy fighter experience, all of that. Like, I want everything to have its place and make sense and be competitive with each other, for sure. So I hope those guys are doing well, because, you know, there's only so much hours in a day, guys, and I can't really be, you know, championing for the multi-crew experience yet. When, you know, the expert side of the game for me is the PvP at the competitive smaller scale.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, what I've realized is if you give a multiplayer environment to a group of people, whatever the optimal way to play the game becomes, whether it's intentional or not, will be the way people use the experience. And in a game where
snub fighters and racing ships, for example,
death of a spaceman is a reality and there are things to lose, people are not going to play the way the game is intended. They are going to play the game the way you can win. And so we have to design a game where winning is the way the game is intended to play. And this is exactly why we need to get into the next part of this discussion.
Yo, the man is cooking. I like it.
With master modes.
True. What it gets wrong, and then it shows him in a snub fighter. Yup.
Ever since Master Modes was conceptualized, CIG has been telling the fans and telling us that Master Modes brings fights closer. The truth is that that's not true.
Okay, it is true in the group scale squad setting. No one can, like, that is not true in the group setting. In the 1v1 setting, the same things are the meta. Backing up, creating distance, kiting the fighter, and getting your target to pursue you in a vector is still the meta. So those ranges have not come down. And the problem is those ranges were only low or small, and Avenger knows this, when the opponent was willing to fight. And the moment they weren't willing to fight, light speed off, they're gone. And they're going to either reset the fight on you or they're going to just leave. So that was the issue. In a group setting, those ranges have come down significantly. But in the target on target, no plural experience, the ranges are probably a little bit longer, I agree.
Master Mode's fights, especially in PvP, do not bring fights closer. And there's a reason for that. Remember what I said before this, that players are never going to play the way
they bring duels. They don't bring duels closer, but they definitely bring the fights closer. They do. Like, that's just the truth.
Something is intended if it's not the optimal way to play. And so as we've been doing our testing, we've found out that the optimal way to play is staying as far away from your opponent as possible. This is due to two problems with the design choice that I'll illustrate here. There is a ratio that every game must follow. In our particular case, in the old flight model that many of us have been talking about, had high top speeds and low projectile weapon speeds. This forced fights to enter a space where they had to get within 500 meters to apply damage because the weapon velocity or the speed of the projectile was slow enough that you had to close to within distance because the ships were moving so fast. This was problematic for many of the player base because the truth is much of the player base was unable, unsuccessful, untrained, unwilling, or not knowledgeable enough to even close the distance to get within the range that they needed to apply damage. And so you had these phenomenons of ace pilots flying around taking on 20 versus 1 because none of the enemy pilots had the skill to get up to the speed, stay there, and maintain a target solution long enough to kill. This caused a big rift within the SC community. You had ace pilots playing at a high level that almost no one could attain, and the rest of the galaxy just sitting there watching like, wow, I wish I could get there.
Yeah, but the problem is that the ace pilots could not fight other ace pilots that weren't willing. You can't get two orgs to fight each other with the speeds. But he's right. The great thing about lives was that the weapon ranges, dude, this cat is driving me insane. Oh my lord. But the best thing about live was that the weapon ranges were much lower, so they forced, when you did want to fight, you had to get up close at least. For some reason with master modes, and I'm sure he's about to mention this, the ranges increased. Like, if the goal was to bring the combat closer to each other and you brought the speeds down to match, why did you increase the weapon ranges, man? And me and him covered this on a podcast we shared with Salty Mike, but
this is not a recipe for success.
By that.
You want a game where people can be accessible. And so the pendulum swung the other way, and it swung the other way.
This is turned out to be a really good video.
The idea was that if we drop the overall top speeds of ships, then we enter a situation where ships are flying more at their top speeds or at the wall, and it stops people from extending or flying away at high speeds, and it gives a chance for the general player or the general audience to be able to catch, engage, and actually fight the rest of the SC community. The reality is,
look, he's in an M50. The target was just in a Mirai Fury. Oh god.
If you have a model where top speeds are nerfed and weapon velocities are very high, you get what you're seeing here on screen, where the only chance you have is to fly the smallest ship with the highest projectile speeds. If you see this example here, we are flying an M50 from Origin, and we are engaged.
But there's also like a strength in numbers aspect. Like a lot of the Shadow Moses guys, I don't want to give away too much strategy, but you can phalanx better without having to go and resolve to the speed and snubcraft. So there's a bit of push and pull there. But he's right also, right? Like, speed will always be the meta until the weapon ranges come down.
Light fighters, medium fighters, heavy fighters, all military class ships.
Top speed.
And you'll notice one thing. My entire team of M50s are using mass drivers, the projectile velocity of about 3,000 meters per second.
This was, Singes and mass drivers were nerfed after this video. So keep that in mind, yeah? Like, they've been pretty quick to nerf some of the cannons and railguns. And they're not as competitive as they probably were in this video.
Now, this weapon has a total range of 2,500 meters. And you'll see here that most of the time I'm what's called pixel popping.
I love railguns.
I'm flying at a large, like a long enough range, unless I'm third.
But they're not as competitive as they are in this video anymore. Yeah.
Partying like an example here, where I can get close and get a shot off. But you'll notice that I'm firing anywhere from 500 to 1,000 meters, which is twice the distance that I'd usually engage from in the live model.
Because the ranges are too big. He's right, man. Like it was very nonsensical. It's like they made all these great steps, and then for some reason they went the other way with the weaponry, and it hurts everyone. Like the Multicrew guys are suffering because their ship is so easy to shoot at a distance, and they can't shoot back at their target because it's a fucking M50 or a snub fighter. So it hurts the Multicrew guys the most, because people don't need to risk themselves getting close to larger craft because they're easy to hit at distance, and their craft is almost impossible to hit for the Multicrew guys in turrets. So it hurts the ecosystem, specifically for the guys that aren't getting looked after right now, the Multicrew and the larger ships.
The reason I'm using the M50 platform is because I'm very tiny, I'm very small. Because the top speeds, or speeds in general, are so low that applying damage to anything that is a light fighter or smaller, a light fighter or bigger, such as medium fighters, heavy fighters, you're getting an almost 100% damage application. Even in this mode here, with Singed Mass Drivers having no fixed assist, which means there is no auto aim whatsoever, there's no pip deflection, I have to have a true shot, I'm still applying damage to some of the smallest ships in the game, like the Fury. And I can apply damage from a very far range, and I have a small profile to shake off incoming damage on my end. And because I'm an interceptor, my overall top speed is higher, and thus we have the interceptor meta. It does not matter what my turn rate is, how many damage hit points I can sustain, what my overall DPS is, because on paper, light fighters, medium fighters, and all these other ships are significantly more powerful than any of the other cast. But the reality is, just like in the previous model, I can engage and disengage on demand whenever I feel like it. And now, with the advent of twice the velocity of weapons, I can now engage you from twice the distance. And so we have the exact same problem we had in live, except for now.
Yeah, but here's the thing though, Avenger, like you're right, like, and he's looking at this from like the cockpit experience, right? The engagement ranges are much further. You had to be within 600 before you started shooting at someone in live. You don't have to be in regards to that. But look at the radar. Right now, there's 10 players all within 2 kilometers. That's the aspect that they fixed. The ranges came drastically lower because of that in the group setting. But in the target-on-target experience, yeah, the ranges are higher, and it's not a good thing. So he's right. But he's also wrong in that aspect, right? It's disingenuous, and he doesn't mean to be disingenuous, so don't take that as a character judgment, right? But the speed, the ranges are drastically lower, and it's way better for the game. But they are drastically lower in the group setting, not the target setting.
Now, instead of light fighters, we have them happening in interceptors. So the geometrical problem that we had in live has not been fixed. The philosophy of how Master Modes is conceptualizing these ships is simply not going to work, because the player versus player base is not going to fly ships, and neither is the rest of the SC community going to fly ships that are unable to defend themselves in a gang setting. In a duel, in a 1 versus 1 situation, most interceptors will lose against most light fighters and medium fighters. But the reality is, most fights in the persistent universe are going to involve groups of people. And you're also condemning an entire class of ship, light fighters, heavy fighters, and the lot, to certain death against gangs of interceptors like M50s.
And then this comes up to like, how good is interceptors and snubs up against the phalanx classes? Because at the moment, the phalanx is light fighters and medium fighters, those and heavy fighters. Those 3 classes, I don't like calling them archetypes. We're going to call them classes from now on, boys. Those classes are there to stand their ground and brawl it out. Interceptors and snubs are gonna, encircle you. They're gonna do strafe runs. They're gonna do passes and stuff like this. And that's the problem, right? Is like they need to make sure that the classes that aren't there to brawl, aka fight it out, aren't getting, have too much resources to just constantly do this. And I think they've not done a terrible like seeing the M50 getting PvP'd with right now and him using that, it just breaks my heart. Like, just take the guns off this. You should not have the M50. No one should. But the snub fighters, they don't take well to getting hit. If you hit a snub fighter, it's going to hurt the snub. So they've done decent balancing in that regard. But the outlier is really the Buccaneer. You know, the Buccaneer is so strong right now. So, but he's right. Yeah, like at the moment, the meta is just going to shift to capturing the same aspects of live, which is low risk gameplay, low investment PvP, abusing easy survival in high speeds.
Archimedes, Razors, 85Xs, and those of the other sorts, because they are simply not fast enough, not agile enough.
I agree.
To close the distance and kill the opposing.
Yeah, they need to buff the fighters in flight characteristics. They do. He's right. Let the man cook.
Ship attacking them. And if you do it right, like you're seeing in this example here, most interceptors won't even take a single hit. And so even though
it's like they've nerfed the classes too much instead of buffing up the classes that are underperforming. Like, the answer isn't just to whatever gets played the most competitively, hit it with the hammer. It's often to buff up the stuff that's underperforming to match, not just to nerf everything. But it's right. Like, the fighter, the combat, the gameplay target versus target, right, when it comes to the other classes is not nearly as fun anyway. So the answer isn't to nerf the interceptors and the snub fighters. It's to bring the other ships up to that same ability, that same maneuverability, right? That same flight performance. And do not get me wrong. I do not want high top speeds. You know, I don't want high top speeds. I want acceleration. Yeah. I want geometry to be achieved. Yeah. To positional combat. I do not want to just undo the master modes. My God, my cat. Hold on. I don't want to just undo the master mode changes, but I do want this cat. I do want these other archetypes to be more interesting to fly. Flying's gonna be fun again, because right now it's very much just this, like, you know, slow drift. The flight experience is not nearly as fun. The ability to close distance is really lacking, etc.
CIG may nerf,
and it's like already bad in light fighters, let alone the medium and heavies are just buses right now.
Or balanced interceptors to make them easier to kill. Most interceptors are not even going to get hit to begin with. And so we're faced with the same problem we had in live, where we have an untouchable class of ship only flown by the competent and experienced pilots, able to engage an infinite amount of targets from infinite ranges, almost at above or beyond visual range.
It's like, but here's the thing though, right? Like, Avenger right now is in an M50 with low risk investment, meaning like he's relatively safe the whole time because he's got speed on his side, he's got the ship on his side, the size of the ship on his side, he's got the interceptor characteristics that come with the snub, and he's got the huge maneuverability that comes with the snub. His defense is in movement, right? He's rocking 2 size 2 weapons. Now, say you go the opposite class. You go into like a phalanx class, a brawler class, like the Hornet, which is the medium fighter, the new Hornet, the Mark II, the F7A. You hop in that. It has 3 size 3s and a size 5 on the roof. Like, this thing slays out. So if this, like, and people, especially Cheddar Moses, are finding that, yeah, you're not going to have that low investment of risk going in those ships, and you are a target, but you can stand your ground a lot. So I'm not of the opinion that it's just interceptors and it's as bad as Avenger describes it. I do think there's more options, and I do think you can make the other archetype work, but it is heavily favored towards the interceptors. And it is, you know, by what percentage, I'm not sure, but it's very much a speed meta still. But I don't think that Yogi and that have failed entirely when it comes to those other archetypes. But I do think the speed or the maneuverability, the flight aspect of those other classes does need to improve. It does. but they do the brawling, stand their ground aspect that they were probably designed for. Not too bad. They still work. Like, you go into a squad battle, people can win lobbies in Hornets, yeah? And they're just like brawling and taking out whoever come their way. Like, that can happen. Because the problem is when you're in the interceptor class, a snub, you're playing the speed defense game so often that often the fight is happening around you while you're just trying to survive. Like, you're so focused on surviving that 5 of your teammates have died in the process that aren't in those same ships. And what does it look like when it's all interceptors versus the phalanx classes, the brawling classes? Not sure. Would have to see organized group gameplay for that. I know the answer to that internally, but that's internally.
This problem can be fixed, and it can be fixed with speeds.
But it is an issue. I don't want to
discredit
discredit
that. About a week ago, the engineering experimental mode for the networking system had the Gladius and the A2 Hercules in it. But it just so happened that there was a glitch, and the Gladius had access to all 1200 meters per second of its speeds, with its weapons and shields still being online. This essentially gave us Master Mode's thruster model with live speeds. I had always maintained the position, and I still do now, that increasing the SCM speeds
here we go.
to 400 or 500 would make the gameplay feel significantly better, and I would be able, and you would be able, to engage interceptors and other ships of the like, because we'd have a lot more flight flexibility, flight movement brought back into Star Citizen. This was met by some people agreeing and some people disagreeing, but what can't be refuted here is the simple geometry that I'm about to show you when it comes to what the Star Citizen's flight model would look like if 500 meter per second speeds were given. So here we go in our turn fights, pushing an angle. Okay, look at our speeds right now. We're at 380. I'll just talk you through the speeds here, guys. 485. Okay, look at this. Look at this. 395 meters per second after we just came in from 485. And the reason we have that kind of geometry is because if you look here, okay, what ends up happening is...
Am I missing something? I'm just going to go back through this.
I'll just talk you through the speeds here, guys. 485. Okay.
Yeah, they collided. Like, the reason you got the pancake is because you rammed the dude.
Look at this. Look at this.
Like, he got hit and thrown off balance.
395 meters per second after we just came in from 485. And the reason we have that kind of geometry is because if you look here, okay, what ends up happening is in this position here, okay?
This is positional combat, absolutely. But am I missing something? He hit the guy. Like, the guy spun out of control.
Because I have higher SCM speed. In the old model, okay, look at our speeds right now. We're at 380. I'll just talk you through the speeds here, guys. 485.
We go, bang. Look, like he's spinning out of control, dude.
485.
Boom. Look. Bro.
Okay.
He's spun out of control.
395 meters per second after we just came in from 485. And the reason we have that kind of geometry is because if you look here, okay, what ends up happening is in this position here, okay, because I have higher SCM speed, in the old model, I would be forced to start moving forward because I'm at 400 and...
I mean, it's nice to see the speeds are so close. I mean, like, him and the target are within 80 meters. Like, I love seeing that. But, like, the position in relation to his target, they got hit by the ram. You know, like...
38 meters per second, okay? So now, this guy that's moving towards me is going to rip right past me. And I'm not going to be able to get my nose around
Hopefully
soon enough.
More
now,
examples.
watch what happens. Because I'm merging with him, because I'm preemptively like, okay, I know what's going on here. He's coming to me. I'm going to catch him in this turn. What ends up happening is, as he comes past me, this position here, 475 meters per second. But he's moving across me at like probably 500. Okay? So here we go. We move across. I turn my nose. I am still with him. Okay? The reason I'm still with him is because my little ball in space is moving down with the other ball in space. Okay? And as he goes past me like this, I turn my position and I am on target. I am now in a position where his nose is facing 90 degrees from me. So now I have a dominant position because I made the right choice to carry the momentum with him and catch him as he comes past me. The problem is Afterburner is so much faster than SCM that what ends up happening is this could never happen. This could never happen in the current master modes. It's not possible, because as soon as I'm in an orientation where my nose is not matched with his nose, I cannot close distance.
Yep.
If my nose and his nose aren't directly lined up with each other, I cannot close distance. My top speed is reduced so critically. So when that happens, I'm actually able to gain a position.
It's also like it's an issue with the 2-speed system too, right? Like it's absolutely an issue with the 2-speed system, which is this: you're stuck in a phone booth when you're not boosting, and then the phone booth's a lot bigger when you're not. Like he's not wrong in this aspect, and I do miss this part of the game, but I just worry that 500's a bit high, like. Because if you're talking about increasing the SCM to 500, then what, at boost you're at 700? Like it's a lot, bro. That's a lot. Like, yeah, this looks neat in a 1v1, but in the group aspect, this is gonna get bad quickly. But he's not wrong. Like, I miss the merging aspect. I miss the, fighting down the river feeling and actually having the ability to accelerate to certain speeds. I miss the geometry of this. But I don't miss the consequences to the group setting. And I also would want to see a lot more geometry in this, because like these angles happened because you collided with the guy.
And as you can see here, now I'm actually pushing towards him. You can see my throttle is pushed down almost 100%. I'm pushing towards him. I want to hold that position, and I'm lighting him up. I'm at 168 meters. He's clearly visible in front of me. And this would never have been possible. This kind of geometry is not possible in master modes, because I cannot carry my momentum with the target, you know?
Yeah, he's right. You can't control your position as well as momentum at the same time, because everyone has too much maneuverability to answer to anything you're going to do. You start going forward, well, they can start going back at the exact same speed easily. Like, there's no geometry. He's right in that aspect. But I just don't know if increasing the ceilings of these speeds so high is the answer. Yeah, like could it be the answer to a degree? For sure, but you got to think of the big picture as well here, right? Like, I'd want to see what happens to the group fights. Like, I love this. This is all great, yeah? Like, I'm completely on board. What I'm not on board with is what would happen if there's another 20 players duking it out here. Like, and that has to get ticked. Because if this means that you've doubled the speed ceilings of all the ships, then you've increased the range that all these ships are apart from each other in a group setting. What does that look like? Are we back to 50-kilometer fights where we're quantum jumping to teammates? You gotta be really careful when it comes to that aspect. But yeah, in the 1v1 stuff, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think that there are issues in MM with the 2-speed, the bubbles and stuff like that. The unboosted being so confined in comparison to the boost, and then, you know, the gradual progression between the two, and the fact that the moment you let go of boost, it starts to arrest your momentum pretty quickly by forcing couple down to the unboosted speeds. Those mechanics need working for sure. And I do miss, like, he's merged with momentum here and using it to gain positional advantage. I get that. Loved that in live. It worked great. It was the group aspect of this that didn't.
Because the differential between SCM
I'm praying he's got more
and Afterburner is so dramatic.
No, he doesn't.
That it ends up creating these really weird separations, and the acceleration is so fast that by the time you actually respond to anything, it doesn't matter, because like you hit the
I want to see more of this
boost button and you're just gone. Like, you're just gone, you know? And this is a huge problem. You know,
I don't know who this guy is either. Like, the problem is too, is like in live, you could have great geometry fighting people that don't know what they're doing. Problem is this is one of his org mates on an alt. I got no idea who this guy is. Is he capable? Is this position happening because of the RAM? Is it happening because he doesn't know how to control his ship that well and he's not taking advantage of pitch? You know, like, the problem is every time we look at something like, oh, this is so great, we need to say, is this meta? Is this what competitive gameplay is going to look like? Or is this just a glimpse of something that was cool, but 80% of the fights aren't going to be like this? You know, that's the problem, is when we want to capture something like this, it needs to be the experience all the time, you know, if not most of the time. And I just worry that this is a highlight of 1 hour worth of footage. And I'm scrolling through right now. He's not going to show any more of it.
How do you fix
I want to see 10 more other fights that look
the backstrafing problem? Okay. Here's how you fix the backstrafing problem. To put it simply, if a ship is able to move in space without being restricted, you're able to merge within that target's distance and stay there. Because our turn rates are low enough that by the time we actually do end up turning our nose around,
look, like in this scenario, look, I know I'm fucking talking over him.
Stay there.
In this scenario, you would tricord upright. And if you tricorded upright, you would close distance on his wake, which is that blue line coming out of his engines, and you'd get to him aggressively. Right now, in MM, the process of cutting this circle to get close to him is so slow.
Because our turn rates are low enough that by the time we actually do end up...
Like, you need to be able to force to get onto this guy quickly. And that's what tricording was great for.
Target's long gone. Increasing SCM...
Because you could cut the corners. Like, right now, you want to get even closer, you go up, left, and forward. Right? And then before, up, right, and forward.
But not Afterburner will allow us to merge...
Right now, though, in MM, you're just kind of slowly drifting through it.
Stay with a target and stay closer. Coupling that with lower velocity projectiles, which will allow us to...
Increase SCM to 450 or 500 after boost is only 100 plus of the SCM. I would say... I would shake hands with you, Avenger, on 400 and 500 and like 20, right? 400 being the SCM limit, and then boost being 520. Because the boost isn't like boost, its importance is in acceleration, how quickly you ramp up the speed. It's not just the ceiling. And I don't know if I agree with MM, like being Yogi and that's decision, their flight team's decision, that boost is what increases the speed limit rather than more so an acceleration tool. I think like boost is like, I need to get there and I need to get there quick. It's not about I need to build up momentum and have a high speed ceiling. It's about needing to get there and accelerate, pedal to the metal, instead of just increasing the bubble size by 2. So I actually agree with this, you know, but the problem is we are going down the path of huge mathematical complication here. And trust me, like I've been in Discord with these guys, these flight nerds in my org, like Galoith, okay, who have described words I cannot even pronounce or repeat. I don't even know how to say them, you know, when it comes to the vector math of stuff like this. Yeah, like my boy made an entire grayscale game, like gray box game, to simulate and describe the mathematics that are involved in positional combat fighting. Okay, maybe I'll do a video on it one day, but just to show how this math works. So the problem I have with this is I hope that increasing the speeds to this, if this was a direction we were to go in, I would want to see the results of what does group gameplay look like? What does the archetypes or the ship classes look like when they interact with each other? What does the general 1v1s look like? What does weaponizing cheese look like in this aspect? Stuff like this. But I'm not opposed to this, man. Like, what we have right now is not working. It's not. The group setting, it's working great.
People shooting from too far
away. It makes sense.
We'll give a game that is much closer.
It hurts in flight.
Fun, and also
the
still
flight
have
aspect
enough breadth
sucks.
of movement to reward pilots for properly engaging, turning in on their target, and actually flying to get a position. And then we ask the question, well, how do you stop the infinite backstrafe? The beautiful thing is we've already solved this problem with master modes. We have an asymmetrical speed zone. Afterburner speeds give us 600 forward, but nothing else in any other direction. What we're asking for is to bring the standard control mode speeds up to 500. So they should only ever be slightly slower than your top afterburner speeds. And if somebody decides to stay at their top SCM and backstrafe, then all you have to do is simply push towards them and get underneath them. Let's take this example of 2 enemy Gladiuses engaging each other. Gladius number 1 in the blue is pushing towards the enemy in the red. The enemy in the red is reverse or backstrafing at 400 meters per second. This allows for a 100 meter per second delta, which is quite a fast close. But in this case, because our higher top speeds will grant us the opportunity that you saw in the previous Gladius video, where I was able to stay with my target even though my...
Yeah, consequence to this though, right, is if this is the case, 400 versus 500 is not nearly good enough. Like, Avenger's wrong in this aspect because the weapon range is so high that blue is going to get obliterated before he gaps the distance in red. So like where he described ratios, backstrafe needs to be slow enough so that the blue guy has enough push advantage to get the position before he's dead. But the problem is the time to kill is on red guy's side, because he's going to kill you before you achieve this. Like, and that's a huge issue with the flight. And like 500 versus 400 is not enough. It ain't. Like, you got to nerf backstrafe more in that regard. Like, you need like 300.
Offset from the enemy. This kind of geometry is crucial to having actual space flight feel good.
And the problem is too, is like, it's not just backstrafe too. Like, if the red ship decides to use his up strafe, it's just, and then like, because look at it this way, guys. Backstrafe is just back drift, backwards drift. To backstrafe, you don't need to just use, you know, reverse thrust. You don't need to just go press your S key to go backwards, right? You can just strafe upwards and pitch down, which is bring your nose. So like, and that's a big problem with is people use any strafe besides forward and they don't touch forward. And if you use any strafe and you hold any strafe, whether it's up, down, left, right, or backwards, you're going to create distance away from the target because you're not trying to get closer to them. You're moving to the side of the fight. You're sidestepping the fight. And then all you have to do to make that backwards drifting is keep your nose on target. So no matter what angle blue gets, if you're kiting anything but forward, you're going to start going in a backwards direction, whether you like it or not. You have to apply forward to stop going backwards drift every time, because you're constantly going to put yourself where your momentum is going backwards because you're trying to keep nose on target. So that's the problem, right? Is like the answer to nerfing backstrafe isn't just backstrafe, it's all the other strafes as well. So like forward needs to come up, because that's the problem. Like a lot of our guys, when we do our 10 hours of dueling every day, which is ridiculous by the way, but that's what we do because we're degenerates. Our guys call it throttle neutral, which is where you just don't go backwards and you don't go forwards. But because you're using all the other strafes and you're going to keep nose to nose with your target, because that's the aim of the game, you're inevitably going to start drifting backwards, whether you like it or not.
Good. And give us
so
the
I just don't know if
flexibility
this
to
gets
engage
solved.
targets at
I don't
speed.
think this gets solved.
Now, there comes an issue when the enemy decides to joust through. Ironically enough, Master Modes makes jousting one of the only viable strategies to getting...
Jousting's not bad as long as the distance isn't that much, but that's what positional combat is. Someone gets your back in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you got to get out and try to reset. You know, like that's defense. I don't mind it as long as they can't go out at like joust out like 2k, 1k, 3k. Then it's horrible. But if you're just talking about pushing out of a distance, like pushing out of a bad position, turning back around, that's fine if it's within a container of a reasonable speed.
Away. And this is due to two things. Because we have such weak speeds in any other direction other than forward, what ends up happening is the only way to disengage is forward, because that's where the only speed zone I have is capable of disengaging with. Now, imagine a world where that wasn't the case. Because I've already gained distance against my enemy and I'm holding a position outside his nose, he's got one option. I need to turn my nose away and get out. If he starts to do this, he's going to apply the majority of his thrust off his main thruster, which you see here. Now he's starting to push 500 meters per second forward. And the idea here is if I have an up strafe that's almost as strong or as strong as my main strafe, and I catch that disengage quickly, I will be able to stay with my opponent as I transition to a chase. In the model that we currently have with Master Modes, this is an issue because of this geometry right here. In order for me to catch my opponent, you'll notice here that I'm only able to reach 15 Gs and only able to reach a speed of 350 meters per second. So what ends up happening is as I start to turn myself away, as I start to gain a position, I cannot reach the speed I necessarily need to get to be able to stay with my opponent. To put it simply, if he's able to travel at 500 and I cannot, the only position I can transition to where I can chase him is right directly in behind my opponent. which means I will need to turn my nose until it reaches that blue section here. But in the time it takes me to turn my nose away, the target is long gone, thus creating the problem of the joust. This is very prevalent in master modes because we simply do not have the thruster power nor the available speed necessary for us to stay with an opponent if we are outside of SCM. If we increase SCM, we directly increase the ability and the distance of fights to get closer and stay closer, thus allowing us to reduce.
I just want to shake hands with him on this, like a little lower than what he wants, you know, because I just, he's looking at this through the perspective of target on target, and he's not looking at the group setting.
Weapon ranges, keep the fights closer, and reward pilots that have the flight skill to maintain a position and enjoy it. This will also give parity.
No, I agree with this.
Light fighters, medium fighters, and interceptors, because the differential between SCM and Afterburner will be tighter. And so if you make a mistake as an interceptor and a light fighter or a medium fighter is able to turn into it and merge with it, the separation distance won't be fast enough before that medium or light fighter is able to punish you within the ranges it needs to punish you in. For example, if you're going at top speed in an interceptor, nobody can catch you. If you take a turn and a Hornet sees you take that turn and pulls into that vector and catches you as you pull through, you are not going to be able to hit the oh fuck button and leave at any time, because now the differential between his top speed and yours is tight enough that the Hornet will be able to engage you if he makes the right turn at the right time. It rewards skill-based gameplay, and I think everyone deserves to have a chance, no matter what ship they're in, if they do it right and they have good flight skills, to kill any ship in the game, including interceptors. So that
he's not wrong. Like when you merge with momentum like this, it's heaven, man. It's
we stay
heaven.
away from a future where all the PvP community flies the smallest, lightest fighters.
You gotta look. I want to see the consequences of what he's proposing, because my gosh, I think there might be some holes in this place. Like the group fights could slip right back to unreasonable distances. You know, that the game could start performing bad again, and stuff like
Nobody
this.
can hit them.
But the current flight tuning of master modes ain't cutting it. It ain't.
Except for that class of ship. If you have a ship exist in a space and an energy state that no other ship can get to, you directly create a meta, and that meta will be used because that is the way to win. And people will always play the way to win, not the way you designed it.
Yep.
There is a direct correlation between velocity of weapon and applied damage.
Bro, his
if your
videos have
velocity of
gotten
your weapon
better.
is greater than half the speed of your ship, the damage application is substantially higher. So for example, if we're shooting 3,000 meter per second weapons and we're only going 500 meters per second in Afterburner, which means most of the time we're cruising around at probably 250, 300, then what we end up having is a weapon that's 10 times faster than the ship it's being fired from. If that's the case, then CIG has to take a serious look at weapon ranges, because if I'm going to have a weapon that's essentially hit scan here, then I need to have a weapon system that has a limited range. Because if I'm able to apply damage with low deflection at far distances, then what's going to end up happening is small ships with high projectile weapons, like you see in this example, are going to absolutely dominate everything. It's really quite simple. The lower the velocity, the shorter the range. And so we get into the debate of multicrew. Master Modes has promoted people to play multicrew and to get people involved in turret gameplay and all these other fun functions, which I'm all excited for. Engineering gameplay is being tested, and so CIG obviously wants their bigger ships, which I think most of the SC community wants to be good as well, into a place where they can compete against gangs of fighters and be able to either A, defend themselves effectively, or 2, actually contribute to the fight. The reality is, we have the same geometrical problem in Master Modes as we do in Live. Outranging multicrew ships is become trivially easy, especially now with the advent of precision mode. Take this Fury, for example. I tested out in terms of how close I can get to this hammerhead. Where is the actual damage applied zone? If I'm maintaining an evasive pattern as I move in, and I'm avoiding the cone fire, the damage that actually applies to me is only within 800 to 900 meters.
The multi-crew guys need to be looked after for sure.
And so if I maintain a defensive pattern, I back off, and I maintain a distance that's anything greater than 900 meters, I am now essentially invincible. And what's even worse now is I can go into precision mode and my guns will automatically gimbal onto the target system. So I don't even have to lead target the system at all. The game does it for me. And I simply pick off points on ships that I want to engage, and it's rinse and repeat. You add into that ballistic
Yeah, but this, like, you're also in a racing ship that's,
and subsystems on these Multicrew ships become
Fury,
truly
actually.
easy to knock out.
That's so, like,
Both
he's
of
also
these
in a
turrets were knocked
snub.
out on the Hammerhead within a few seconds, and I have no doubt in my mind that I could have taken out the rest
I
of
don't
the
like
turret
this.
crew
I don't
within
like that you can shoot turrets off of ships. I
in a
think
similar
it's
amount
so
of time.
bad.
So it begs the question, what are we designing?
At least
Are we
this
designing
easily.
a world where Multicrew ships can be effective? If that's true, no amount of buffing hit points, shields, or weapons is going to fix this geometrical problem. The only way that this will be fixed is if the weapon ranges for fighters are low enough that they have to enter the space of a Multicrew ship's danger zone. So you either increase the velocity of Multicrew ship weapons so that the Hammerhead is able to reach out and touch me at those ranges, or you reduce the fighter weapon ranges, which would force fights to be closer, and you reduce the velocity of the projectiles. That would give an incentive to also get closer to apply more damage. If Master Modes wants to get fights closer, it has to get this simple ratio right. And whether they like it or not, the ratio between speed and weapon velocity in the live model was significant.
That's the big one, right? Like, you can't change one of those without the other. It's all ratios, he's right.
Significantly better than it was in Master Modes now. Flight to gun ratio is basically a simple calculation of percentages. In live, we had 1200 meter per second SCM speeds with 1400 meter per second weapons, which means that our speeds were 85% of the speed of our guns. So the speed of flight movement was significantly higher than what we have in Master Modes, which is only 20%. Our weapon speeds are above 3000 in some cases. And you might ask, well, Avenger, we have speeds of weapons that are much slower. But the reality is, if you use a weapon system that is slower in velocity, and somebody brings a weapon onto the grid that is faster in velocity, you can see clearly from this example that these Hornets and light fighters don't stand a chance. And so I come back to my original point. People are not going to play your game in the way that you expect them. They are going to play in the way that wins. So in closing, I feel like I've made a case for why SCM speeds, and only SCM speeds, not Afterburner, need to be increased for all ships into the 450 to 500 range, as shown in the example of the dogfight between the two Gladiuses, in Master Modes with the speeds capped at 500. I feel like we've made the case for lower weapon ranges, because all these examples I'm able to provide here with interceptor fleets with high velocity projectiles absolutely dominating fleets of light fighters, medium fighters, and the lot shows just how powerful small ships with incredibly high velocity and range weapons can be. And the example with the Hammerhead being forever and infinitely kited is not going to lead to better positional gameplay, is not going to lead to Multicrew ships being viable, and is not going to lead to the fix of the problems that we originally set out to fix with Master Modes. And I feel like the weapon ranges overall need to be reduced, and I feel like the case was made for that as well, because if CIG would like to keep the weapon velocities quite similar, then they have to make a choice on weapon ranges, being in parity with the weapon ranges of Multicrew ships, so that there is an equal part of risk on both parties to apply damage to each other. This stops fighters from dominating everything in the galaxy other than other fighters of the same class. I know this was a very long talk, and I apologize for taking up 35 minutes of your time, but it's important to understand these concepts.
Oh no, I'm at an hour and 20 minutes.
The evidence that we've uncovered with Master Modes and where the meta is at the current state, and the geometrical issues and challenges that we have to contend with, I strongly feel like the changes proposed, if given to the community for feedback, would be very well received. At the very least, why not try it? These are my thoughts and my feedback. I really hope that most of you made it to the end of this video, and if you're a CIG dev and you've taken a look at this, thank you for your time. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, folks, for watching. My name is AvengerOne. Post your feedback in the comments. Get involved in the discussion of our game, and I'll see you next time.
Yo, good one. I enjoyed it. Look, I'm on board, man. I'm on board. Like, I miss the merging aspect of the gameplay. I miss the ability to cut geometry and trim the fat, because right now there's just so much fat in master modes, a lot of drift, a lot of lack of control, lack of being able to force anything. So I tend to agree with a lot of this, to be honest. I'd be skeptical of going up to 550 because because the problem is as the ratios dictate, you increase the SCMs, then the interceptor has to go beyond that SCM. So all of a sudden you got interceptors at like 700. But if the cutoff point was like, you know, 550, maybe the interceptors could get to that speed and that was it. And then, you know, the light fighters, mediums and stuff are around the 400 mark. I could be on board. Yeah, I wouldn't commit, right? Like I wouldn't sign anything until I've seen it in practice, because I worry about what he's not talking about in this video, which is what does this look like to group gameplay? What does this look like to hammerheads that are trying to shoot at their targets that are flying away 400, 500 meters with relative ease? Does this alienate large ships again? You know, but I want to see the geometry of it. But I like the idea of the merging down the river gameplay that used to exist in live that I think we've lost with MM. So look, you've sold me to a degree. I'm ready to entertain it. I want to look at it before I judge it, but it makes a lot of sense, man. And by God, his videos are getting better, aren't they? Like, bravo, Avenger. Yeah, like I'm gonna shit on him because he's flying a racing ship in PvP, you little scumbag. But aside from that, what a good video, great video. Close friend of mine, a best friend of mine, recommended this. And I tell you what, he's a harsh critic. So the fact that he enjoyed this video, I can see why. You did a good job with this, Avenger, good stuff. And I surprisingly agree. Yeah, like I definitely want to see this, you know, and there's other ways to it, right? Can you get better geometry? A lot of other players' arguments is if you slow things down more, then you get better geometry. But I have seen geometry work in live, but it's hard to recreate and it's hard to force. And then the problem is if you take the handcuffs off, a whole lot of bad things can happen too. Yeah, you can get some good stuff like this to happen in highlights, but you can also get a whole lot of bad things to happen. So I want to see how it would play out. Throw it in a master mode, call it the AvengerOne's shootings, in a specific master mode lobby, or play mode, whatever, in Arena Commander. But the flight needs to change. It's not delivered at all. The framework is great. The experimenting with gunnery and all that is great. I also agree with the weapon ranges need to be lowered slightly, at least slightly, to encourage more up to close fighting and bring all the ships kind of closer together. But I have a hard time disagreeing with any of this. Like, I'm open to things now, right? Like we need to explore avenues, because it ain't it right now. And it's funny because I'm very positive about the framework. I'm very positive about master modes, but the flight tuning, I have been very constant with. It does need work. It does need work. Anyways, boys, I appreciate you. An hour and a half, unapologetic about it. It's a good video, man. Can't help it. Whatever. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Give me a 1, 2, 3 if you got this far and you're a real one. I appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and comment to help me with the algo. Check out Avenger's channel and all that jazz. He just did a series on how to play master modes. Very admirable. Cool that he's looking out for the Multicrew experience. Cool dude. Cool stuff. Appreciate it. All is good. I will catch you guys in the next one, yeah? Fly safe or don't. I don't care. I'll catch you next time, yeah? Peace.